We got it right, Mama?
Make sure it's hot. I have to print you.
In a modest Indianapolis home in 1965, a teenage girl began a summer of hopes for normalcy, then fell into a nightmare that would horror her city for generations. 16-year-old Sylvia Likens arrived as a boarder, but by October, her life had been stripped away by abuse so cruel it defied belief. Her battered body, discovered in the basement of her caregiver's house, bore more than 150 wounds, and the people responsible included children of the community. This wasn't just a murder. It was a prolonged betrayal by someone who should have protected her and a failure of those who should have intervened. Sylvia's life and beginnings. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3, 1949, in Lebanon, Indiana. She grew up in a traveling carnival family with twin younger sisters Jenny and Benny and an older brother. When her parents were unable to care for her and Jenny in the summer of 1965, they arranged for the girls to live with Gertrude Baniszewski in Indianapolis for a modest weekly fee. For Sylvia, it felt like an ordinary arrangement, a chance to stay with someone locally while the carnival toured. At 16, Sylvia was still a teenager forging her own life. She attended school, had friends, and hoped for a stable summer. Her sister Jenny described her as responsible and kind, someone who tried to help and adapt. The world expected an ordinary season. Instead, it became a descent into horror. The stage was set for tragedy, not because of an isolated moment, but because of incremental cruelty. As Sylvia moved into a house overloaded with dysfunction, the warning signs were muted, but the outcome would be epic in its cruelty and scale. The Summer of Torment. Once Sylvia arrived at the Baniszewski home at 3850 East New York Street in Indianapolis, the abuse began gradually. Punishments for tardy payments, for eating too much, for perceived slights. Gertrude Baniszewski used physical and psychological control, belts, electrical cords, burns, forced nakedness, and humiliation. Children in the neighborhood joined in at her direction. Sylvia's sister Jenny watched in horror as her sister was pulled down month by month. The home that should have been safe became a cage, and everyone inside knew it. Notes scratched into walls, forced baths, scalding with hot water, and community silence gave way to terrible acts. The abuse became normalized in the house, even though outside it looked just like any other street. By autumn, Sylvia was emaciated, broken, and desperate. She bore hundreds of wounds, some fresh, some healing, each a testament to weeks of cruelty. On October 26, 1965, she died in the home where she had landed as a boarder with hopes, not horror. The barrage of violence ended her life, but it began the longest gaze of revulsion, regret, and unanswered questions in the history of child abuse. Discovery and investigation. On October 26, 1965, police were called to the Baniszewski home in Indianapolis after reports of an unresponsive girl. What they found inside was something that would haunt investigators for years. 16-year-old Sylvia Likens lay lifeless on a thin mattress, emaciated and covered in wounds. The walls were stained, the room smelled of decay, and the silence was heavy with horror. The autopsy later revealed she had suffered a blow to the head, causing a subdural hematoma, severe malnutrition, burns, and more than 150 injuries scattered across her body. Words had even been carved into her flesh, the final mark of her endless torment. As detectives began questioning the occupants of the house, the true depth of Sylvia's suffering came into focus. What initially appeared to be a single act of violence turned out to be months of systematic torture. The abuse had been carried out not just by Gertrude Baniszewski, the woman meant to care for Sylvia, but also by her children and other neighborhood kids. They had beaten, burned, and humiliated Sylvia at Gertrude's direction, turning cruelty into a game. The community's silence made the horror worse. Neighbors admitted hearing screams, yet no one intervened. The investigation exposed not only the brutality within that house, but also the deep moral failure outside it. Under questioning, Gertrude's children and their friends described acts so disturbing that officers struggled to keep their composure. Branding, forced nudity, starvation, dehumanization. It became clear this wasn't just a murder. It was a slow, deliberate erasure of a young girl's humanity. The case shocked America, forcing the nation to confront how evil can grow, unchecked, behind closed doors. Trial, conviction, and sentencing. In May 1966, after a highly publicized trial, Gertrude Baniszewski was found guilty of first-degree murder. Her eldest daughter, Paula, was convicted of second-degree murder, while other defendants received lesser manslaughter or neglect sentences. The verdicts acknowledged a crime that transcended typical abuse and entered the realm of orchestrated terror. Baniszewski was sentenced to life in prison. Paula received a life term, later altered. Many co-defendants were released decades earlier, provoking public outrage and debates about accountability. The trial shone a light not just on the perpetrators, but on the failings of the system of neighbors, institutions, and families who allowed a child to perish under their watch. Over time, Sylvia's case became a touchstone. Legal reforms followed, but the emotional wound remained. Her sister Jenny lived with trauma for the rest of her life, and the house on East New York Street became a grim landmark of what can happen when cruelty goes unchecked. Legacy and reform. The murder of Sylvia Likens did more than horrify the nation. It transformed how America viewed child protection. Her suffering exposed a devastating gap in the system. No one had been legally required to intervene or report the clear signs of abuse. In response, Indiana introduced stronger child protection laws, including mandatory reporting of suspected abuse. This legal shift spread across the United States, creating a foundation for the modern child welfare system. Sylvia's name became a symbol, a reminder that silence and inaction can kill just as surely as violence itself. Communities, teachers, and social workers still study Sylvia's case as a lesson in vigilance. It forced people to ask difficult questions. How could so many have known something was wrong, yet do nothing? The fact that Sylvia's torment happened in a neighborhood full of witnesses shattered the illusion that abuse only occurs in isolation. Her story reshaped public awareness, teaching generations that every scream, bruise, and sign of fear deserves attention. The responsibility to act became not just moral but legal. Beyond the courtroom and classroom, Sylvia's legacy endures in culture and media. Her story inspired documentaries, books, and films like In American Crime, ensuring her suffering is never forgotten. Each retelling is a painful but necessary reminder of humanity's capacity for both cruelty and courage. Remembering Sylvia Likens means confronting the darkness that allowed her death and reaffirming the duty to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Conclusion. The murder of Sylvia Likens stands as one of the most horrifying and instructive crime stories in American history. A teenage girl died not in the night of strangers, but in a house where she should have been safe under the roof of an adult whose care became an instrument of torture. Her death peeled away comfort, community, and complacency. Though decades have passed, the questions remain. Why did nobody stop it sooner? How could so many children participate or witness cruelty and stay silent? And how many others might suffer because the warning signs were ignored? Sylvia's story challenges us to look into the darkest corners of human behavior and to insist we protect the vulnerable, even when the warning signs are small. Her life was short. The pain it unleashed was massive. Yet from that darkness, a legacy arose of reform, of memory, and of vigilance. Sylvia Likens will never be forgotten. If Sylvia's story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true crime documentaries.